Hello, my friends. My name is Ryan Freeman. Welcome to my life, and welcome to a somewhat foggy morning in Shabarn Park in Southern California. Don't mind the ambiance. There's probably going to be a lot of hikers and dogs barking and planes overhead. We'll try to make the best of it. I thought I would talk about a topic that has been very interesting to me for quite a few years. Well, the last 5 years or so. A little personal. So I might share a few things about my life. But I think the topic is interesting enough to probably a few people out there that it's worth giving it a go. And that is mystical experiences. So that sounds, whenever we use the word mystical, I don't know about for you, but I think probably colloquially we conjure up images of magic and sorcerers, and in a certain way a mystical experience is kind of like magic, but from my perspective it's more psychological. And I'm going to try to unpack all of this. I'll try to give you my understanding of what it is, as well as perhaps I'll leave you to share in the comments if you've had something similar, or if you think what I said was wrong. You could feel free to fact check me. So real quickly, I'm going to go into my experience. So for those of you who have followed my channel, you might know that I've dabbled in psychedelics in the past. It's been a few years since I've done anything, but when I was living in Tokyo, I was doing psychedelics pretty regularly. LSD, the distilled form of psilocybin as a powder, N-bombs, MDMA, ketamine. I was sort of hanging out with a group of friends that were really into psychedelics, and we were doing it a couple times a month. Sometimes more than that, sometimes less than that. It always depended. In different configurations, different combinations. And at that time, I was fairly depressed. I don't know if it... See, forgive me if you followed my channel, my Jailed in Japan series, and so this is all sort of a rehash. But I just need to tell this side and to get towards the mystical experiences, which is coming. So I started doing psychedelics with my friends recreationally, just because I'm the type of person who, especially at that time, who would just say yes to experiences. I would date all sorts of strange women, tall women, fat women, short women, skinny women, old women, young women. I was traveling around many countries before I moved to Japan. I'm the type of person who just likes weird and new things. You know, I always try to order something different at the weed store or alcohol store or the bread aisle. I like trying different things. And so I said yes to doing these psychedelics. But one thing they did was they shed a light on my mental illness at the time. And I don't actually want to use that word, mental illness. It shed a light on my despair. I was sort of, even though I was happy in many respects, working and teaching in Japan to lovely students and dating and social life, there was just this inner imbalance, this thing that was missing that I knew, but I didn't know. I couldn't pinpoint. I couldn't put my finger on what was wrong with my inner world, even though my outer world was actually quite nice. But psychedelics, what they did to me, I had done a few psychedelics before getting to Tokyo, but I didn't really understand what they were. When I started doing psychedelics in Tokyo, they scared the shit out of me. I had a lot of bad experiences. I had some beautiful experiences, but they started to shine a light on my inner world, and put me in touch with, I don't mean to sound woo-woo, or pseudoscientific, but I'm not a scientist, and I don't exactly know what's going on with my neurons in my brain or my nervous system. So I can only talk in sort of poetic and psychological terminology that I understand. But it put me in touch with parts of my psyche that I think I had repressed or I had neglected. There's a term called the shadow in Jungian psychology. And the shadow is that part of our personality that is socially undesired, or for whatever reason, it's the part of our personality that we sweep under the rug. And we pretend it doesn't exist in order for us to maintain an image that we're this good guy or a good woman or a great husband, when in reality we're all humans, right? We've got a little good with a little bad. We're humans. And so this psychedelics, they have different effects on everyone, and I'm not trying to say that you should take psychedelics, and this is not to sell you on anything, but for me, it put me in touch with my shadow. And if you've read Jungian psychology or listened to people who've talked about him, like Joseph Campbell, or who's no longer with us, but talked a lot about Jung in the 80s and the 90s, and also Jordan Peterson today talks a lot about Jung. He's having somewhat of a resurgence because he dealt with the deeper layers of our personality, the deeper layers of our psychology, the parts of our experience that usually only religion touches. Usually, scientists. I don't want to bash scientists, but basically, science needs to measure things, right? If it can't measure a variable, then it's hard to be scientific. But when you deal with your personality, when you deal with repressed parts of you, when you deal with sort of these deeper strata of experience and the really powerful experience, it's hard to put a number on, on love or hatred. Now, I'm sure science will be able to explore these things in more detail, and probably they're already doing that. I'm not sure. You can let me know. But Jungian psychology, as you can tell, was a branch of knowledge, or at least a slice of understanding that has helped me a lot, because when I was doing the psychedelics and I started to explore these deeper parts of my personalities, or these forgotten parts of my personality, it sort of like dredged all of this stuff up, whereas I had like sort of a shallow stream. My personality I was actually pretty shallow, I think. I think if you talk to a lot of the people that knew me around that time, I taught English, I acted, I dated. I was just all about girls and beer and having fun. But there was this deeper part of me, spiritual side, more rich, fuller emotions that wasn't active in my life. And as I started to dredge this up with psychedelics, as you could imagine, if you dredge a river, I think it's dredge a river, I've never dredged a river, but the mud comes up and it sort of clouds the water. But on the positive side is you actually get to clear out the river, you get to clear out the waterway, and suddenly your personality has a stronger stream of energy. That's what Jungian psychology is all about, is helping you, and psychoanalysis in the 20th century. And I do not necessarily endorse going down any psychoanalytical path, whether you want to do a Jungian approach or Freudian approach or some other. That may not be the answer for you. That just was something that helped me along the way, that I'm not even delving into much these days, because I feel like, I know I'm getting off topic, I'll get to mystical experiences eventually, but I feel like there is no one solution for anyone. So I think dealing with our inner world, dealing with painful emotions, dealing with our personality, and trying to integrate all its aspects and not have it affect us in a negative way, is something that all humans can relate to. There's a lot of people who suffer from anxiety and depression. Now, maybe some of that anxiety and depression is coming from the world, from the political climate, from the family or lack of family around people. But some of it can actually come from how we handle our inner world. That's my understanding and my experience. And psychedelics, it's been described before by quite a few people from the past and present as a tool for your soul, a tool for your psyche. It's like a microscope. And it's been used in psychedelics have been used in cultures throughout millennia for somewhat different reasons than what I'm talking about, but also for a deeper understanding of this experience that we're all embedded in. And part of that experience is you and your personality. So I started to learn a lot of things about myself that I had forgotten, that I denied, and it was very scary. Jung says when you start to explore the shadow, it's very frightening. It's like you're facing the dragon, but the dragon is that part of you that you've repressed. And if you can kill that dragon, or if you can face it courageously, then you can recover the gold. And in fact, mythology in general, those stories of rescuing the princess, or getting the gold from the dragon, or going down into the belly of the whale, or going into the dark forest to retrieve the Holy Grail. Those are all stories that we remember, stories that people told through the centuries because they had psychological significance. So when you start to get into this branch, sort of depth psychology, you start to look into mythology and you start to realize, oh, those weren't just funny stories. Those are actually stories with psychological significance. We understand why those people were heroes, because they sort of faced their inner demons, faced their shadow. And this was all stuff I had no idea when I started doing psychedelics. When I started doing psychedelics, I didn't even realize I had an inner world. I wasn't thinking about that. I was only thinking about the outside. Of course, I had thoughts and emotions, but I was unaware. When we're so unconscious when we're little, and then as we grow up, our consciousness starts to bloom up like a plant, like a tree, and you start to realize more things about yourself. And as you realize more things about yourself, you realize more things about the universe. And psychedelics is sort of like a powerful tool. Instead of a telescope going out into outer space, it's a microscope that goes into your soul. And it can be very beneficial because it really helps you to tackle that really old advice of know thyself very quickly. There's a line, and I've said it before, that a good psychedelic session is equal to 10 years of therapy. But it also can come with some dangers, because you can, rather than your consciousness normally unfolding without chemical means, it's suddenly you're looking at things that perhaps you might not be ready for. And Alan Watts, a famous philosopher who used to talk about this subject, said that sometimes it's too much for people and it fries the system, too much current for the system. You plug a device into an outlet, but the voltage is too strong and it breaks the machine, or at least breaks it. And I think that happens to a lot of people. I think that's why there are a lot of people who are afraid to do it, a lot of people who have been damaged from psychedelics. Just as we get traumatized in life, soldiers go to war and they see some terrible things and they come back broken. Psychedelics can break you, I think, if you're really not ready, or you don't handle it correctly, or you don't know how to handle it, or you don't follow up in the right way. You don't have the right setting, because it's powerful medicine. But all really great things in life are somewhat dangerous, and come with a risk, but also offer a reward. So I really don't want to say that anyone out there who is suffering from anxiety or depression should take psychedelics. I think you'll know deep down whether or not you should, and you should follow that and follow your gut and your instincts. I was taking them. I fell into this psychedelic group not because they were doing psychedelics. Simply, I had a friend that I had met in China, and we became close friends, and he introduced me to his friends, and then he was like, by the way, we're doing all of these psychedelics, would you like to join us? And like I said, I was the type of guy who took up adventures and risked his sanity and his body for new thrills and new experiences. I don't know, that's my personality. And so I did. And as I was dredging it up, and as I was coming into contact with these deeper layers that were frightening me. As shocking as these experiences were, and they weren't fun, it was actually becoming no longer recreational. I started to see a glimmer of hope for sort of that missing piece that I had felt inside. Even though my outer life was blossoming, and I had more girls chasing me, and I was chasing girls, and I had plenty of spending money, and I was going around Tokyo, which is like one of the coolest cities in the world, and doing fun stuff. But I had that missing piece, some part of me, that gold that the dragon was holding, and so I wanted to get in and kill that dragon, or at least just get that gold. So I did more of them, and then I ended up going to jail. And you could watch my Jailed in Japan series if you're interested. It's very long, but I sort of go into detail on what the jail experience was like. And then eventually moved home, got married, and have carried on my life. But some of the experiences that I had in psychedelics were really beautiful, and also sort of hard to assimilate and understand when I came back to sober consciousness. And so I want to talk about that class of experience, and they're called mystical experiences. Mystical experiences, as I understand it, is an experience where we live in this universe of billions upon billions of galaxies and superclusters of galaxies and nebulas and animals and plants and minerals and people, and we live in a multiplicity, right? This universe is a multiplicity. There's so many things. But in the mystical experience, as far as I understand it and from what I experienced, all of that multiplicity comes into one. And so I had this experience where everything came into one, and I remember even looking over at my two psychedelic trip mates who were next to me, and we had all merged into one being. Our legs were split across, and then I saw this like massive, weird, egg-shaped brain that had just millions and millions of, or innumerable pores. It represented the universe, and there was Joe Rogan, and there was all of these parts of my life. I was listening to a lot of Joe Rogan at the time. All of these parts that were all part of this one experience. I was on 2 hits of acid, 200 milligrams of MDMA, and ketamine, 4 bumps of ketamine at the time. So it was and listening to like Sigur Rós. So it was heavy. It was heavy. That was my first time that I actually saw all of this unification. I had never thought about that. I didn't read authors that wrote about this, but I had this experience, this visual, this vision. It's a visionary experience that you're having when you're doing these powerful chemicals quite a lot of the time. And that was huge, and that was the most beautiful thing, I think, one of the most beautiful experiences I had ever had in my entire life. And I started to try to understand if other people had this experience. I was the type of guy who's a little shy. I don't talk to people around me about this. So I started listening. I was listening to podcasts. So I was listening to Psychedelic Salon, old Timothy Leary lectures, Alan Watts lectures, Sasha Shulgin, Terence McKenna a lot. And I started to hear some Eastern ideas from Hinduism and Buddhism, where they have also conceptualized that this entire universe is one. I don't know if it's Brahman or Brahma, the Atman. I'm not exactly an expert, but I started to become interested in Eastern philosophy and religion because they were describing a very similar experience to what I saw. And then as I did more psychedelics, I started to have this experience more as well, and more powerfully. I would still have the scary things and confront my dragon and all of this, but then once in a while I would have this mystical experience. Then I went to jail, and I would describe my mental state at that time as probably even worse, because as I was dredging this stuff up, I wasn't necessarily getting better. I was getting more stuff dredged up, but I was more cloudy than ever. Go to jail, get hooked on benzos. This is in the Jailed in Japan series if you're interested. Get hooked on benzos, have a benzo withdrawal. My brain breaks, basically, as I would describe it. I didn't realize that this could happen, and this had nothing to do with psychedelics. I went to a worse place than ever, psychologically, emotionally, mentally, where I would describe it as psychosis, schizophrenic. I don't know. And it was because I just stopped taking this drug that I had got from a doctor in the jail. And it was the hardest experience, I would say, of my life, but I believe that our bodies and our psychology tends to go towards a state of equilibrium, and luckily I started to come back to somewhat normalcy. But if you've ever read a lot of psychology or Aldous Huxley's The Doors of Perception, it's like when you open that door of perception, it never quite closes. You know, it's like you see these, or if you play Call of Cthulhu, once you see these horrors, you never quite go back to normal. And so after I've seen all of this stuff, and I do go back to a somewhat state of relatively normalcy, I'm not all there. And I want to get there, so I start delving into Jungian psychology. I start, reading thick tomes, like really difficult tomes that were hard to read. Because even reading Jung is almost like a trip, because you will confront, if you're honest, and you actually want to do this, you will confront your dragons just doing that. And I'm reading all sorts of people and listening to lectures that I would not have been interested if this inner phenomena was not happening. And I end up, as part of this sort of way to sort of get me back to wholeness, end up going to Ecuador, and I do this 10-day ayahuasca retreat where I took 4 sessions of ayahuasca and a session of San Pedro. That blew my mind, and I had the biggest mystical experience in the ayahuasca that was incredible. You know, the whole, we're all one. Like, everything is one. And you've heard this before, probably in pop songs. We're all one, everything is one, right? It's based on, I think, on a metaphysical truth, but we're also the multiplicity. And so trying to be able to balance that, like, because I would see that we're all one in these really deep mystical experiences that were chemically induced, but that many sober people from the past, so as I was researching, who else has had these experiences? I started listening a lot to Alan Watts, because he talked frankly about the mystical experience. Aldous Huxley, he talks about it, and Aldous Huxley says sort of the penultimate mystical experience is the undifferentiated white light. I think they talk about that in Vedanta, Hinduism. But it's this undifferentiated white light where everything unifies. And I saw this undifferentiated white light in my second or third ayahuasca session. And so when you have an experience and then later you read or hear someone talking about this, about people who have experienced this thousands of years ago, it lends credibility to your experience. Because sometimes when you see something that sounds ridiculous, that seems like magic, that seems like a miracle, and we live in a world that doesn't talk about these things openly in the public, you could almost doubt your sanity. You could think you're going nuts, or you just say that was just a drug. But when they have people, philosophers, and just people, mystics throughout the centuries, throughout the millennia, have talked about this. Christian mystics, Hindu mystics, Buddhist mystics, mystics of all kinds, talk about this unity and the undifferentiated white light, and how, even though it appears that we're this flesh-encapsulated ego, I'm Ryan, you're you, we actually are deeper than that one. So, And a lot of what I'm talking about, you could spend a whole day talking about these subjects and explore them thoroughly and drastically. I'm just going off the top of my mind on this subject. So if there's any questions or anything I missed, any holes in it, please put it down in the comments. I'll be happy to answer. But it gave me great relief to read about other people who had the same experiences. Some of these people had it naturally without psychedelics. Some of these people also had it with psychedelics. And I started to realize that a lot of people who take psychedelics, not everyone, but a lot of people have this mystical experience. But then I couldn't really, I wanted to put it into practice, but I couldn't treat everyone as one because it just didn't, it wasn't showing fidelity to the multiplicity, and that was a hard lesson to learn. Because if we all are one, then we should all be in love and all hugging and kissing. But no, in fact, that's not how the world is, right? The world is, there's conflict, there's fights, there's war, there's anger, there's hate. Why is that there if we're all one? So that was another fact to swallow, to understand that, yes, we're all one, but also we're also the multiplicity, and that they both go together. They're sort of two poles. The one, the fact that we're all one and all connected, but also the fact that we're all in this multiplicity. And I'm still assimilating all this. I still read about this, still listen to all this. So this is a work in progress. Might be my whole life, trying to grasp myself, my place in the universe, and I'm sure you might be in the same way. We never stop looking for the truth or coming to an understanding. We just get hopefully closer. Jung described it as circuloquation. I don't know. It's where you go in this spiral towards the truth in the center, but you never quite get to the center. That's how I would describe my consciousness. It expands, but I never quite finishes expanding. Or I never quite get to the answer that I'm looking for. I just get a little closer, I hope. Sometimes not, sometimes I get further. But, where was I? I was talking about integrating this idea of the unity and the idea of the multiplicity. And there are these two poles. You can't have a unity unless you have a multiplicity. You can't have a short unless you have a tall. You can't have a light unless you have a dark, right? That's just the universe we live in. And you can't stay in that mystical state. At least I couldn't. I would come back down. But I will say this, like I said, when the doors of perception are open, when you see something, you can't ever unsee it. And what happened to me in the past several years is I've had actually mystical experiences on the natch. Sometimes with marijuana, but sometimes on the natch. Natural. Just sometimes it's sort of hypnagogia when I'm just in between sleep. Sometimes when I'm in a really deep conversation. Sometimes when I'm in nature. It just hits me, and then I have the mystical experience and realize that we're all one, that everything's fine, I don't need to worry. And then I come back down into the normal experience, and I start to worry and become a human that realizes, oh, I got to be careful, and I don't have that feeling we're all one. And so it's sort of like this type of life that I have now. It sort of flip-flops. Sometimes I get closer to the oneness, and at that time I'm a little more benevolent, and then sometimes I get a little more towards the ego side or the multiplicity side, where I'm me, I'm thinking about me, I'm thinking about my goals, thinking about this, and defending myself, and I used to think that was bad, but now I've come to realize that they're just both part of existence, both part of me. Maybe I'll come to a different understanding in the future, but understanding that I can't control and force this feeling of the oneness, but to accept the multiplicity and to accept this diversity. And why? Look how beautiful it is to be different, how beautiful it is to have autonomy and self-direction and all of that. This might sound like mumbo jumbo to people who haven't heard of this, haven't read about this, haven't experienced this, but it is experience that not only me, not only people of this generation, not only people who take drugs, but people, great people that have written books that have lasted centuries, whose words have been passed on either through religious texts or literary or philosophical texts, that have experienced this mystical experience, this realization that this universe, everything in it is one, and that love is at the very core of it, of being. And then you come back out to the multiplicity and you see hatred and disease and war and all of these terrible things. How to understand it. The Hindus have a great concept, which is probably the best that I've heard, and that's that the original oneness is playing all of these multiple parts, and they conceptualize reality as a drama. And like if you go to a drama, you see the villain, you see the hero, and you root for the hero, and you boo the villain, right? You hate that guy. He's so evil. He personifies evil, or he's deceitful, or whatever it is. And the hero exemplifies the virtues that our society likes. And so we honor the hero. But at the end of the play, we clap for the entire cast, and we love the villain just like we love the hero. So this idea is that in the multiplicity, even though there's evil, it's sort of necessary to have evil and good to actually have what we have here. Just like you have to have light and dark. If you want good, then you have evil. If you want life, then you have death. If you want high, then you have low. If you want you, then you have to have me. You know, this world of contrast, of multiplicity. If you want to play chess, guess what? There's going to be a winner and a loser, unless you come to a draw. You have to have a white side and a black side. And although you hope your side wins, you know, there has to be that other side. I'm far away from understanding this topic, truly understanding this topic. I'll probably never get down to it, but it fascinates me. The mystical experience. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've had an experience, if you want. I know it's a very personal issue. You don't have to. But I hope that there'll be someone out there that will get something from this. And for those of you who think I'm crazy, well, yeah, I probably am. But aren't we all? All right. Thank you for watching this video. My name is Ryan Freeman. Hope you guys have a beautiful day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.